This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. After Yunxiao assigned the tasks in the city, everyone began to get busy. Li Yunxiao had also taken out all kinds of resources in the entire White Rush city and handed them to Yunxiao. At this moment, he had 100% trust in Yunxiao. Yunxiao pointed to a man beside him and said, "Take him to the teleportation formation. He's an 8th-tier alchemist, and he can help you repair the teleportation formation." Li Yunxiao was overjoyed and looked at the man. He saw that the man was very young, and he had some doubts about his ability. But, since he was introduced by Yunxiao, he naturally did not dare to question him on the spot. What made him feel strange was that this person wasn't among the people who had entered the city. How did this person appear? Sheng gave Yunxiao a complicated look and said, "Lord Feiyang trusts me so much, aren't you afraid I'll run away?" Yunxiao stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "What do you think?" Sheng's expression changed slightly. He put his hands together and bowed. "I won't let down Lord Feiyang's trust." He had long known Yunxiao's identity, and he had learned a lot from Yuan Gaohan during this period of time, so the little resentment he had before had long disappeared. Even if he was asked to leave Yuan Gaohan now, he would probably not agree. When he was released and asked for Yunxiao's help in repairing the array, he had thought of escaping with the help of the array and going to the Holy Region to find Yuan Gaohan's real body for help, but he gave up the idea on second thought. If that were the case, not only would the Holy Region be unable to deal with Yunxiao, but Yuan Gaohan's avatar would also be put in extreme danger. If Yunxiao ruthlessly killed this clone, Yuan Gaohan's alchemy skills would never improve again, which was something Sheng did not want to see. Moreover, he was not confident that he could escape. After all, the man in front of him was the legendary Peerless martial sovereign, Feiyang, whose title was Army Destroyer. After watching Li Yunxiao fly away with Sheng, Yunxiao flew up to the top of the city wall and carefully observed the terrain. His glabella flashed, and a ray of light shot out. Jinshan instantly reappeared. This buy-in. Jinshan looked around in a daze. From the beginning to the end, he still couldn't understand what was going on with him. Yunxiao pointed to the front and said, "The sea race is coming to attack the city soon. I'm going to set up several arrays here. What do you think?" Jinshan was stunned. "The sea race is attacking the city? What is this place?" He looked around in a daze and saw that the people in the city were all in a hurry. The entire city seemed to be shrouded in an extremely oppressive atmosphere. Yunxiao's face darkened. "You don't need to know this," he shouted. "I need to set up several arrays here that can block the army of 100,000 Sea Tribe soldiers and withstand the attacks of high-level martial sovereigns." 100,000 troops? A high-level martial supreme? Jinshan was shocked and said, "If the 100,000 soldiers are only at the 3 talents, for symbols, and 5 elements realm, there shouldn't be a problem. If his realm is any higher, there's still a high-level martial supreme." He looked embarrassed. Yunxiao said coldly, "The army of 100,000 is basically at the realm of 6 directions, 7 constellations, and 8 desolations, and there may not be only one high-level martial emperor. I don't care about that. You must stop them for me, or I'll throw you out and let you stop them." This buy-in. Jinshan was instantly dumbfounded. He still couldn't react to what had happened, and he was about to face a crisis of life and death. "We don't have much time left," Yunxiao said with a solemn expression. "In 3 to 10 days, the sea race will definitely come to attack." Although he had not come into contact with Yunxiang many times, he had observed his personality very clearly. He would definitely not allow himself to suffer such a huge loss. He would definitely adjust his condition in the shortest time possible and attack with all his might. What he was most worried about right now was still that deep-sea giant beast. If it was mobilized, the entire White Surge city would probably not be able to stop it. All of a sudden, Yunxiao's face flickered, and an idea flashed through his mind. He seemed to understand the situation in Matian City and the intention of the Sea Clan. If they were also summoning deep-sea beasts there, His face suddenly turned extremely ugly. He didn't know about the hidden cards of the skyscraping city, but he had experienced the strength of the deep-sea giant beast. If those things could really be summoned, and more than one and in groups, not to mention the skyscraping city, even the Red Moon City or the Misty Snow Sacred City might not be able to stop them. Young Master Yunxiao, what's wrong? Pu Jinshan asked carefully when he saw Yunxiao's face turn pale all of a sudden, not knowing what had happened. Yunxiao snorted and said, "Mind your own business. In short, in 10 days at most, 3 days would be the best. Set up a few powerful arrays for me. At that time, you will be the main array below the city. If the array is broken, you will be the first one to die." With a wave of his hand, he transferred all the resources that Ji Zhengxiang had given him to Pu Jinshan. Furthermore, with a flash of light, the 5-element white fish also flew over. Pu Jinshan was already dumbfounded. When he saw the 5 elements white fish, he immediately revealed a look of joy and said excitedly, "If you have this, give me 3 days. I can set up a great 5 elements barrier. I can even block a few high-level martial sovereigns." "I hope so," Yunxiao said. "In short, you have to remember that you are the one who is in charge of the formation. If the formation is broken, I will not let you escape into the city." Pu Jinshan's face immediately turned green as he sobbed, "Lord Yunxiao, are there really 100,000 sea tribes? What's the cultivation base of a high-level martial supreme? How many of them are there?" "There are more than 100,000 sea tribe members, but I don't know how many high-level martial sovereigns there are," Yunxiao said. "But one of them is a deep-sea beast, and its strength may be comparable to a 9-stars martial sovereign." A 9-stars martial sovereign. Pu Jinshan's heart fell into a bottomless abyss, and he felt the world spinning. He cried, "Lord Yunxiao, it's my fault for offending you before. I've tried my best to make up for it, and you've also promised to let me live. Even if I do everything I can, it's impossible to stop a 9-star martial sovereign." Yunxiao looked at him coldly and snorted. "Don't act pitiful in front of me. Do as you see fit." He flicked his sleeves and left, turning into a ray of light that shot up into the clouds. He entered the void and sat down cross-legged to cultivate. Pu Jinshan's glass heart shattered to the ground as he gave the void a resentful look. He knew that Yunxiao must be watching him every minute, so it was impossible for him to escape. He could only try his best to set up an array with all the things he had learned. He held the 5 elements white fish in his hand and regained some of his confidence. He didn't know how powerful it would be if he could set up a great 5 elements boundary with this thing. Perhaps it could really block a 9-star martial sovereign. Yunxiao smiled as he watched Pu Jinshan get busy in the void, but his eyes were flashing with a serious look. With a flash, he directly transformed into a human form in the Divine Realm tablet and looked at the endless land. In a barren land, there was a red patch. The blood fiend that he had captured earlier was lying on the ground, seemingly resting. Yunxiao disappeared from where he was and reappeared above the blood fiend, deep in thought. The blood beast seemed to have sensed something. It rose to its feet and stared vigilantly at Yunxiao while growling, and its eyes shone with a fierce light. "This thing of yours is also made of endless tainted blood," Yunxiao said. "You can use it to make some use of its remaining heat." He made a grabbing motion in the air and the blood fiend was immediately pulled up. It struggled with all its might but to no avail. Bang! Yunxiao clenched his fingers, and the blood beast exploded, turning into a pool of blood in the air. But soon, it gathered toward the center and condensed again, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Humph! Yunxiao snorted and crushed it again. Then, he took out some raw materials, unfolded them in front of him, and threw them into the tainted blood. A series of hand seals flashed through his hands, and rays of golden light were sent into it, starting to refine. 3 days later, Yunxiao sat cross-legged in the air with a long, red ruler floating in front of him, spinning. The surrounding spirit chi gushed madly into the blood ruler and was constantly sucked in. Yunxiao took out a large number of primordial stones and shattered them in the air, then the blood ruler swallowed the vast amount of primordial chi as if it could never be full. 2 days later, the blood ruler's spinning speed became slower and slower. Finally, it stopped and quietly floated in the air. Yunxiao opened his eyes as well, and there was a look of joy on his face. With a wave of his hand, the blood ruler fell into his hand, and runes flashed on it one after another. In the end, the light converged, and it looked like an ordinary red jade ruler. Yunxiao muttered to himself with some heartache, in order to feed this thing, I've almost used up all my primordial stones. If I can't unleash its power to my satisfaction, then it really won't be worth it. Although his heart ached, there was still joy in his eyes. He seemed to be very satisfied. Then, with a flash, he disappeared from the Divine Realm tablet and reappeared in the sky above Whitewash City. Yunxiao looked out of the city and saw Piyu Jinshan sitting cross-legged on a big rock, his hands in a strange incantation gesture, and he was not moving. His body did not seem to have changed at all. But, when Yunxiao swept his divine sense over it, he felt an extremely dangerous aura coming at his face. Even he felt a little frightened, as if he would suffer an unimaginable attack as soon as he entered it. Yunxiao was surprised, but he smiled. Humans could only unleash their greatest potential when they were facing life and death. In the city, Sheng had also almost finished repairing the teleportation array. He had also helped Li Yunxiao repair the city's great array. He used to be a secret alchemist and knew many strange secret techniques. He also joined in and made Li Yunxiao extremely happy. At the same time, Li Yunxiao was also trying to find out Yunxiao's identity, but he was interrupted by Sheng. Don't ask if you don't want to die. You don't have the right to know the identity of this lord. This shocked Li Yunxiao, and he was filled with all kinds of speculations about Yunxiao's identity. At the same time, he was overjoyed. The stronger Yunxiao was, the greater the confidence he had in defending Whiterush City. On this day, the passage between Baicheng City and the outside world was finally restored. Good news came from Blazing Light City, and a large number of martial artists were teleported over to help defend the city. The Red Water team led by Yi Lechi had also been found, and the Towering Sky City had also sent an order for Liao Yangbing and the other two teams to stay in Baicheng City to assist the Castellan Ji Jingxiang. The city lord's mansion had a new meeting hall. It was very simple, but it did not lose its majesty. Everyone gathered inside. There were close to 100 people seated in the hall. They were the 3 martial sovereigns and a few captains from the skyscraping city, some martial sovereigns and captains from the Blazing Light City, and finally some of the leaders from Baicheng City. The atmosphere was still alright, but Ruan Shichuan was sitting there alone, exuding an inexplicable chill, making the atmosphere of the entire venue extremely awkward. Yi Lechi didn't know what had happened, but seeing Ruan Shichuan's gloomy expression, he knew that there must be something wrong. However, it wasn't convenient for him to ask, so he could only stand there quietly with a habitual smile on his face. Ji Jingxiang's face was full of enthusiasm as he said in delight, "Thank you for coming all the way here to help us. I'll introduce everyone to each other." 10 squads had arrived from Blazing Light City, 2 of which were level 1 squads, 3 of which were level 2 squads, and 5 of which were level 3 squads. As such, the strength of the entire Whiterush City had been doubled. 2 of the first-level teams were from the local sects of the Eastern region, the Mountain-Crushing Sect and the Moon-Bearing Sword Sect. They were led by a few mid-stage martial supreme elders. Everyone's face was filled with pride and confidence as if they were the only ones who could stop them. The elders of the 2 sects nodded at Ruan Shichuan and Yi Lechi of the Red Moon City, and they just glanced at the others. Even though he was a little arrogant, Ji Jingxiang was still exceptionally happy. After introducing himself to everyone, some of the elders of Baicheng City also had happy expressions on their faces, and they were all grinning from ear to ear. "We'll definitely do our best to assist you, Lord Castellan," Yi Lechi said. "It won't be a problem for us to protect a city." He also knew a lot about the East Sea battlefront. All the experts in the entire coastal area were gathered in the Sky Towering City, while the other places were just some shrimp soldiers and crab generals at most. It was much safer to stay here. Ji Jingxiang expressed his gratitude, then turned to Yunxiao and said, "I wonder how confident Lord Feiyang is in defending the city?" The crowd was taken aback, and their brows furrowed slightly as they sized Yunxiao up, wondering why Ji Jingxiang had asked this man. Yunxiao smiled slightly, but it was a bitter smile. The key to defending the city was whether Pu Jinshan's Great Five Elements barrier could stop the deep-sea giant beast. If it could, the city would be fine, but if it could not, he would still die unless another 100 teams came and annihilated the beast with a sea of people. A trace of worry flashed across Li Yunxiao's face as he asked tentatively, "Does Lord Feiyang feel that you are not confident?" "I hope so," Yunxiao sighed. "I hope it works." His declaration immediately caused Li Yunxiao's heart to become heavy. The atmosphere in the hall became slightly oppressive. "I hope it works, right?" Yan Shushu, an elder of the mountain-crushing sect, sneered. He raised his chin and gave Yunxiao a contemptuous look as he said, "What's this person's name? You dare to speak so arrogantly here?" Yunxiao shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, "If I don't say, I hope it works, then should I say, I hope it doesn't work?" Yan Shushu's face darkened, and he shouted, "How audacious! Only martial sovereigns of the 9 heavens are qualified to speak here. Who do you think you are to speak so casually?" Everyone's expression changed slightly, and they all had different expressions. Li Yunxiao secretly felt that things were bad and hurriedly stood up to mediate, but he heard Wan Shichuan's strange voice from behind him, "Humph, with Lord Feiyang's divine might, what sea beast can't he kill? Don't try to scare us little minions." Lord Shichuan is really humorous. Yan Shushu laughed sarcastically and said to Wan Shichuan in an attempt to please him, "For an ignorant junior like him, just give him 100 slaps and let him reflect on his actions." Wan Shichuan's face flashed with a cold smile as he squinted his eyes and said, "I don't think that's a good idea. After all, we're all on the same side and fighting for the human race." Yan Shushu quickly became respectful and loudly praised, "Lord Shi Quan is indeed of noble character and prioritizes the overall situation. We are ashamed of our inferiority." Wan Shichuan's face turned red. "Lord Shushu, you're being too serious. Let's listen to what this Lord Feiyang has to say." What wise ideas can he possibly have? Yan Shushu's eyes flashed with contempt, and he laughed, "Well, I have to learn from Lord Shichuan's magnanimity, so I'll just listen to his words." Everyone cast a disdainful look at Yan Shushu. This kind of flattery was no different from kneeling and licking. You're a mid-stage martial supreme after all, is it really good to flatter him like this? However, Yan Shushu acted as if nothing had happened and continued to sit proudly. Lechi didn't know the details, but he found that something was wrong. Both he and Wan Shichuan came from Red Moon City, and he knew that the latter was by no means an easy person to talk to. There must be something between Wan Shichuan and Yunxiao. Everyone's here for Baicheng City, so please don't misunderstand. Li Yunxiao hastily added. Although young Master Feiyang is only an 8-star martial supreme, his strength is extraordinary. Oh. Yan Shushu said disdainfully, "Then if there's a chance, I'll definitely ask young Master Feiyang to give us some pointers." Li Yunxiao was extremely anxious. The sea race had not arrived yet, and if they directly caused internal conflicts, the consequences would be even more unimaginable. "There's a chance," Yunxiao said indifferently. "I'll have a chance." Yan Shushu's laughter suddenly stopped, and his face darkened. He shouted, "What did you say, kid?" Gu Yuesheng had been standing carefully behind Yunxiao with an expressionless face. At this moment, he raised his eyes slightly and glanced at Yan Shushu with undisguisable ridicule. Wan Shichuan was secretly pleased with himself. He also hoped to use the power of these two sects to deal with Yunxiao. Even now, he could not be sure what Yunxiao's cultivation base was, but he did not dare to fight again. Lechi frowned and said, "Elder Shushu, the war is urgent at the moment, so I hope you can do me a favor. Any grudges, any dissatisfaction, we can talk about it after the defense of the city, how about it? Since it's Master Yueqi who interceded for this kid, I naturally won't pursue this matter for the time being," Yan Shushu hurriedly said. Lechi nodded slightly, but when he saw Wan Shichuan's angry gaze, he was even more curious about what had happened between the two. He turned his eyes to Liao Yangbing, who also had his eyes half closed and pretended not to see anything. So, he could only turn his eyes to Yunxiao, who had a clear look in his eyes as if nothing had happened. Does young Master Feiyang know the situation of the sea race here very well? I know a little, Yunxiao said. I know that they have a very huge sea beast with infinite power. I don't know if I can stop it. How powerful is he? Lechi asked. I can't tell you the details, Yunxiao said. I don't know if those sea beasts can fight on land. I hope they can't, or the situation will be grim. The elder of the moon-bearing sword sect, Jing Yongya, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. If it's a giant beast, you don't have to worry too much. This time, the Toyu sword sect also brought 3 8th-grade netherworld battleships, which are the best at dealing with giant beasts. Great. Ji Jingxiang was overjoyed and hurriedly said, with 3 8th-grade warships, there's nothing to worry about. I will never forget the righteousness of the Moon Sword sect. It's our duty to defend our clan in this war. Jing Yongya said with a serious expression. Yunxiao was also slightly delighted. With 3 netherworld warships and the Great 5 Elements barrier, they might really be able to stop the deep-sea giant beast. Ji Jingxiang bowed to everyone and said, I'll leave the safety of Baicheng City in your hands. Everyone hurriedly stood up, but no one dared to bow to him. Suddenly, a long, sharp howl came from outside the hall, piercing one's eardrums. Enemy alert. Ji Jingxiang's expression changed drastically. Liao Yangbing's pupils shrank, and he said, they actually came so quickly? He turned his eyes to Yunxiao. Ji Jingxiang did the same. Although he was the city lord, it seemed that everything was under Yunxiao's control. Yan Shushu's brows furrowed, and a trace of gloominess and doubt appeared on his face. Jing Yongya's brows also rose slightly, but he did not say anything. Let's go to the city gate tower first, Yunxiao said, his eyes narrowing. Under Ji Jingxiang's lead, nearly 100 experts flew up to the top of the city wall and stood in a row as they looked into the distance. The figures of the sea race couldn't be seen on the horizon, but everyone could sense the aura of a storm coming. Everyone's faces revealed a grave expression. Jing Yongya's eyes were fixed on the outside of the city, and he asked suspiciously, that's Luo. He's an array master invited by Lord Feiyang, Ji Jingxiang quickly explained. He's set up an extremely powerful restriction outside the city. He, Liao Yangbing, and the others were all wondering in their hearts. Pu Jinshan and Gu Yuesheng seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, and they had no idea when Yunxiao had called them over. Or were they old acquaintances and had been in the city all this time? I see. Jing Yongya nodded, and he could not help but re-evaluate Yunxiao. I didn't expect an array master to be here. It should be foolproof. Yan Shushu sneered, even array masters can be divided into many types. I can see that the area outside is completely blank, and there isn't a single trace of a formation. Could it be that this formation master forgot to set it up? Everyone frowned and looked down the city. Indeed, they couldn't feel any powerful restrictions, so they were all suspicious. Yunxiao looked into the distance and knew that it would take some time for the army of the Sea Tribe to arrive, so he turned and walked toward Yan Shushu. Ji Jingxiang was greatly alarmed and hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. Lord Feiyang, Chanqian. Yunxiao frowned and said indifferently, previously, this lord said that he wanted to ask me for some guidance. I was just planning to give him this opportunity. Yan Shushu was stunned for a moment, and then his face darkened. He coldly said, what did you say, kid? My ears aren't good. Ji Jingxiang was so anxious that his head was covered in sweat. He hurriedly said, Lord Feiyang, United Front, United Front.